All right, so picture this. We're in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. It's November 19th, 1863. Just a few months after that, well, devastating battle.
Yeah, a lot of history there.
Yeah, and today we are going to be taking a deep dive into Lincoln's Gettysburg Address. But we're going beyond just the words themselves. We really want to understand what makes it tick, even all these years later.
I like that. What makes it tick? It really is like a finely crafted watch, you know.
Yeah.
Every word, every phrase, just so carefully chosen
Oh, I like that.
to achieve a very specific effect.
Yeah. And one thing that really struck me, I guess, right off the bat was just thinking about the historical context, right? Like this wasn't just a random speech.
Oh, absolutely not. No,
Yeah.
this is the dedication of the first ever national cemetery for fallen soldiers.
Wow.
Can you imagine just the atmosphere there, the grief, the solemnity?
Oh, yeah.
Lincoln was, essentially being asked to give a few appropriate remarks, but he saw it as an opportunity to do so much more.
He really elevated the moment, didn't he?
Oh, he did, yeah.
Yeah.
And he managed to achieve multiple things at once. I mean, he defends democracy itself, right?
Yeah.
He's demonstrating his strength in the face of, tremendous sacrifice. It's like he's saying, look what we are willing to fight for. This is what democracy means.
Right. And it's really interesting how he intertwines that, defense of democracy with this like broader definition of the Civil War's purpose.
Exactly, yeah. He frames the war as this fight for the soul of the nation, a struggle to preserve, these ideals of equality and unity.
And it's interesting, he doesn't even use the word union in the speech, right?
That's right. It's subtle,
Yeah.
but a powerful choice.
Power, yeah. Okay, so we have this like heavy historical context, these really profound aims, and then he delivers a speech that's barely over 2 minutes long,
I know.
272 words.
Yeah, that's part of its genius. Like Lincoln really understood the power of being concise. That
Yeah.
every single word is so carefully chosen. Drawing from, well, everything, I mean, biblical verses to historical documents to, his own just deep understanding of what it means to be human.
Yeah, it's not just about being short, though, right? It's about how those words are put together.
You got it.
Yeah.
That's exactly right. Like, our source, La Fantasy, points out Lincoln's masterful use of these rhetorical devices, like that triplet, of the people, by the people, for the people.
Oh, yeah. That's a classic.
Right. It's almost become synonymous with democracy itself.
Exactly. It
Yeah.
just perfectly encapsulates these core principles of democratic governance, and in a way that's both memorable and deeply meaningful. It's simple, yet so profound, and that's what makes it so effective. And he uses, repetition and wordplay throughout the address, too. Connecting words like dedicate, dead, and devotion creates this powerful rhythm and really drives home his key themes.
It's like a carefully crafted poem, almost. Like every syllable is deliberate. Every phrase resonates with a deeper meaning. That's a great way to put it.
Yeah.
And speaking of deliberate choices, let's talk about Edward Everett.
Oh, yeah. The orator who spoke for like 2 hours.
I know, right?
Before Lincoln. Can you imagine?
It's wild, right? I mean, it's hard to even fathom today, but these super lengthy orations were just the norm back then. And Everett was like a master. His speech, no doubt impressive in its own right.
But I'm curious about, like, after people listen to Everett for 2 hours and then they hear Lincoln's short address, like, how did they react to that?
Well, that's where things get really interesting. I mean, imagine that shift in energy, right?
Yeah.
The contrast in style. Everett gave this, meticulously detailed account of the battle itself, focusing on strategy and military maneuvers. And then Lincoln comes along. And just like that, in a matter of minutes, reframes the entire conflict.
Right.
Right? Connecting it to these timeless ideals.
It must have been quite a change of pace. Did it completely overshadow Everett's speech?
You could say that. I mean, newspapers at the time really make it clear that Lincoln's concise and powerful message just had a much greater impact than Everett's, lengthy oration. It really is a testament to the power of brevity, just choosing your words so carefully and delivering them with such purpose.
Really makes you think about how we communicate today, doesn't it?
Yeah.
In this world of just information overload, maybe we could all learn a thing or two from Lincoln's approach.
For sure.
So we've got this incredibly powerful speech, right? Delivered at this incredibly powerful moment. But I'm curious, like, did it actually have the impact that Lincoln intended? Did it resonate with the people who heard it?
That's a great question, and honestly, it's something historians have kind of debated for years. The immediate reactions to the Gettysburg Address were actually pretty mixed.
Really? I mean, you'd think a speech like that, like it would have been universally
Well,
praised.
you got to remember, I mean, the country was so deeply divided at the time,
Right.
and newspaper reactions to the speech, they they fell pretty neatly along party lines.
Ah, so even back then, politics got in the way.
Yeah, it seems like they always do.
Yeah.
Democratic papers, they criticized the speech, while Republican papers, well, unsurprisingly, championed it. And even some of Lincoln's supporters, uh, they weren't even sure what to make of it at first.
Interesting.
They were expecting something a little more, well, traditional, maybe a more, detailed account of the battle itself.
So the brevity that we admire today, it might have actually thrown some people off back then.
It's possible, yeah. But there's also this persistent myth that Lincoln himself believed the speech was like a failure.
Oh, I've heard that.
Yeah.
Yeah, didn't he supposedly say something like that speech won't scour, meaning it wouldn't have like a lasting impact?
Yeah, that's the one. That's the anecdote that always gets repeated. But LaFantasy, our source, he points out that it's based on some pretty shaky evidence. Like the story relies on the account of Lincoln's bodyguard,
Hmm.
who claimed he overheard the president, making that remark.
So it's like a historical game of telephone.
Exactly, exactly. We don't know the exact context of the remark,
Hmm.
or even if it was accurately reported, really.
Mm.
And frankly, it doesn't quite line up with other evidence,
Yeah.
that suggests that Lincoln really did believe in the power of his words.
Okay, so we can't really be sure how Lincoln felt about the speech's initial reception, but I think what we can say for certain is that its legacy has far exceeded, I think anyone's expectations, right? It's considered one of the most important speeches, in American history.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, it's studied in schools, it's quoted by politicians, it's, invoked in countless films and books, and it's reached far beyond America's borders,
Yeah.
I mean, the Gettysburg Address has been translated into, dozens of languages
So,
and continues to inspire people all over the world.
why do you think that is? What gives this speech like such staying power, even in a world that's so different from Lincoln's?
Well, I think it really has to do with the way Lincoln just taps into these like universal human emotions.
Wow.
He speaks about grief and hope and determination, feelings that I think just transcend time and place. And he reminds us of this like shared longing for a better future, a world where government truly serves the people.
And he does it with such simple yet profound language. Like, I've always been struck by the final lines that this nation, under God, shall have a new birth of freedom, and that government of the people, by the people, for the people, shall not perish from this earth.
Powerful, yeah. It's a powerful ending, isn't it? It's like a call to action,
Hmm.
a reminder that democracy, it's not something we can take for granted.
Yeah.
It's something that we have to actively, fight for, protect, nurture.
It's almost like a prophecy, I guess, right?
Yeah,
A warning that's become, I think, even more relevant, in our own time, where democracy feels, I think, threatened in so many parts of the world.
exactly, yeah. And it brings us back to that question of the speech's impact.
Mm.
Lincoln may not have been able to predict the course of history, but he did understand something very fundamental, I think, about the human spirit, our capacity for both great sacrifice and great hope. And he just captured those truths in a way that continues to resonate with us even today.
It's amazing to think that a speech delivered in a matter of minutes could have such a profound and lasting effect.
It really is. But perhaps that's the magic of words, right?
Yeah.
They have this power to shape our understanding of the past, to inspire us in the present, and to guide us toward a better future.
Now, I want to bring this back to you, our listener. What resonates with you most about the Gettysburg Address?
Think about those final lines again.
Mm.
What unfinished work do you feel called to dedicate yourself to? What sacrifices might be necessary to ensure that government of the people, by the people, for the people, doesn't, vanish from this earth?
Yeah, I've always wondered, like, what was it actually like to be there in Gettysburg that day? Like, what was it like to hear those words for the very first time?
I know it's something you can only imagine. Some accounts talk about this stunned silence,
Right.
after Lincoln finished speaking. Like the crowd was just, absorbing the weight of his words. Others mention thunderous applause.
Hmm.
So it seems like the reactions really varied quite a bit.
I guess that's history for you, right?
Yeah.
We get these like little snippets, these glimpses into the past. but the full picture always remains a bit elusive.
It really does. And it's funny you should mention glimpses into the past because, well, there's actually this really famous photograph,
Yeah.
of the crowd at Gettysburg. And to this day, historians still debate whether or not Lincoln himself is even visible in the image.
Oh, wow. Like a historical, where's Waldo?
Exactly. It's amazing how one single image can capture so much and yet leave so much to the imagination.
I wonder what his expression was like, as he spoke those words. Knowing the impact they would have, like on the course of history.
It's hard to know for sure, but I imagine it was a mix of, well, determination, hope, maybe even a touch of sadness,
Yeah.
given, the immense loss of life. But even without, a definitive photograph,
Hmm.
the power of his words, I think, speaks for itself.
It
They
does.
continue to inspire and challenge us and even comfort us in times of uncertainty.
Yeah, speaking of challenge, though, I'm curious, how did the South react to the Gettysburg Address? I mean, this was a speech that essentially called for their defeat.
Yeah, well, as you might expect, the reaction in the South was, well, far from positive. Southern newspapers, they downplayed the significance of the address. Some even ridiculed Lincoln's eloquence. They saw it as, well, as nothing more than propaganda.
Well, yeah, I mean, it makes sense from their perspective.
Right.
They were fighting for their way of life, their beliefs, their very identity.
Absolutely. But what's remarkable is that even though Lincoln doesn't explicitly, address the South in the address, his message is still unmistakable. This war, he argues, is about preserving the nation,
Yeah.
and that includes bringing the Confederate States back into the fold.
So it's not just about winning the war.
Right.
It's about healing the divides that caused it in the first place.
Exactly. And that phrase, a new birth of freedom, I think is particularly interesting here. It's clearly alluding to the Emancipation Proclamation, but it also hints at this broader vision,
Hmm.
of a nation where equality is truly a reality for all citizens, not just a select few.
So it's not simply about, ending slavery. It's about creating a more just and equitable society for everyone.
Exactly, yeah. And that's a message that continues to resonate today,
Yeah.
as we grapple with these issues of, well, racial justice, economic inequality, and political polarization. Lincoln's words, they remind us that the work of building a more perfect union is never truly finished.
It's like he's passing the torch, I guess, to future generations, saying, this is the unfinished work. What are you going to do about it?
That's right.
For a speech that clocks in at under 3 minutes,
I know, right?
the Gettysburg Address really does pack a punch. It's incredible how he was able to distill such complex ideas into such a concise and just memorable message.
It is. And I think that's maybe the greatest lesson that we can take away from this deep dive.
Yeah.
The power of words to shape our understanding of the past, to inspire us in the present, and to guide us towards a better future.
So the next time you find yourself, feeling overwhelmed by the complexities of the world, take a moment to revisit the Gettysburg Address and let Lincoln's words remind you of the enduring power of hope, courage, and the human spirit.
And remember, the legacy of democracy is in our hands. It's up to each of us to ensure that those who fought and died for freedom did not do so in vain.
That's a powerful thought to leave us with. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the heart of Lincoln's Gettysburg Address. We'll see you next time for another fascinating exploration of, well, history, ideas, and the human experience.